What's up guys, how you doing? Welcome to another video. So which is more important, the camera or the lens? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. I think this could be quite a good fun one. So one of the things I get asked about the most is people contacting me, asking me what I think about their potential plans to buy this camera or this lens or that lens. And one of the big things that I often get asked, especially people who are working to a budget, is would I be better investing my money in a new camera or would I be better investing my money in a better lens? Which is more important, the lens or the camera? If you're restricted on your budget and you can only upgrade one, the lens or the camera, which should you choose to upgrade first? I think I've come up with a bit of a fun way to try to answer that question. That's what we're going to do today. Before we get into it, I'm going to ask you guys to do all the usual YouTube magic for me. Make sure you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, comment below. You know what, comment whatever you like, right? We're just trying to play with the YouTube algorithm. We're trying to get my video to be a little tiny bit more successful. So make sure you get involved, hit all the buttons, hit all the comments. Guys, thank you very much for doing it. So I was thinking about how to answer this question. Which is the most important, the camera or the lens? And what I thought it would be good fun to try is to get a really decent camera and pair it up with a really cheap lens. Then we're going to get a really cheap camera and pair it up with a really decent lens and see which one works the better. Expensive camera with a cheap lens or cheap camera with an expensive lens? Which one is going to give us the better results? Well, I will tell you how we're going about testing this one. Now, I'm very lucky. I do own a couple of very good bits of camera gear. I own the Canon R6, which is a very decent camera. Will cost you upwards of £2,500 to get that camera brand new at the moment. I also have a very decent lens, the Canon 2470 Mark II, the f2.8 version. Again, a really good lens, which if you buy that brand new will cost you best part of a couple of £1,000s. So we've got the good camera and we've got the good lens, but I needed some other things to pair with them. So to make this as interesting as I could, I went onto eBay and I found the cheapest possible used camera that I could find. The cheapest one I could find. And that resulted in me picking up a used Canon 350D, and I picked this up for £40 on eBay. Canon 350D used on eBay, £40. Then we need a real cheap lens. Now luckily I had a really cheap lens lying around. This is the Canon 18 to 35 EFS lens. You guys might be familiar with this. It is a plastic build lens, comes as a kit lens with a lot of cameras. You can pick these up used on eBay for less than 50 quid. So we've now got a decent camera, a decent lens, a cheap camera and a cheap lens. How are we going to pair these up? Well, I'm actually shooting on the R6 and the 2470 right now. So we're going to use my 1740 and my 1DX to demonstrate. We're just going to pretend these are the cameras for a second. We're going to take my real decent 2470 f2.8 lens and we're going to put that on the Canon 350D. Cheap camera, expensive lens. We're then going to take my R6 and we're going to pair that up with the EFS 18 to 55mm lens. Expensive camera, cheap lens. Which is going to give us the better results and therefore hopefully answering the question of which is more important, the camera or the lens. A couple of quick caveats to this. I did create my settings in a way that made it a fair performance. So you guys might know with the 1855 it is a variable aperture lens, and what that basically means is the further you zoom in, the more the aperture increases or the number increases. So actually decreases, but that's a separate video. At 55mm on this lens, the camera will automatically go to f5.6. So to make it a fair comparison, I also shot the R6 with the 2470 at f5.6. I did that deliberately because if I did it with f2.8, of course, it's just going to give you that slightly different look, and I was trying to make this as fair a comparison as possible. Now, I know I can see the comments coming. Some of you guys might be talking about the fact that, yeah, but one of the benefits of a better lens is the fact you could go to f2.8, and yes, you're absolutely right. There's a few kind of variations like that we'll talk about at the end of the video, so make sure you stick around to the end because we're going to talk about a few things that aren't covered in this extremely non-scientific, entirely made up, off the top of my head test. So in order to pull this off, I needed a beautiful model, a fantastic assistant that I could go take photos of. Luckily, I have one of those right here in the house. That's right, I got Mrs. Sambles. We went out the side of our house and we took a couple of different photos, both just portraits, both in the same kind of distance away. So for all intents and purposes, the images look the same. But of course, one of them was taken with the cheap camera expensive lens and one of them was taken with the expensive camera cheap lens. So first of all, I'm going to show you just the raw files straight out the camera so you can see how they came out, and we'll talk about those in just 1 second. After that, I'm going to show you the processed photos and a couple of other bits along the way. But look, no messing around, let's put the raw photos up right here on the screen. I've got them right here on my laptop. Let's compare these and see what we think. Okay, so here's the two photos that we took. Like I said, guys, these are the raw photos straight out of the cameras. Now, the first thing that is straight away apparent to me is that you would say, I think looking at this, the overall image quality is definitely better with the R6, so the expensive camera and the cheap lens. Probably because, as I said, they're raw files, so there's much flatter color profile, not too saturated as you get with the raw file. The idea, of course, you do a bit more work in post around that. But I would say definitely, you know, wider dynamic range. The highlights aren't as bright, the shadows aren't as dark, compared to the 350D file, so the cheaper camera with the expensive lens, where it's a bit more contrasty. The dynamic range, you can see, struggled slightly. The highlights are a bit brighter and the shadows a little darker. Also, there's much more of a kind of color cast across that photo, almost like a slight red tinge. There's a lot more red in the background compared to the color profile of the R6. However, one thing which I did find interesting, if I zoom in on both these photos, so you guys can see the kind of more zoomed in crop, the thing that you notice straight away here. So the photo taken with the R6 is much softer than the photo taken with the 350D. Of course, that is because of the lens. Of course, we had the cheap camera, but we had the expensive lens. So you can see, especially if you're looking here around the eyes, you can see it is much, much sharper because this was taken with the good lens, compared to it being fairly soft around the eyes on the cheaper lens, even though it was taken on the much more expensive camera. The other thing you can notice is the noise, so it's probably quite hard for you guys to actually see on the YouTube screen, so you might have to trust me a little bit on this one, but there is a lot more noise in the photo taken on the 350D. Of course, the lens isn't able to help that much with the noise. The sensor is the thing that affects quite a lot of that, and you can see, especially kind of in the wall, in the background, and on the cheeks a little bit here, there is a lot more noise on that photo taken with the 350D compared to the other photo, of course, taken with the cheap lens, but the R6 has just absolutely controlled that noise. These photos were only taken, I think, ISO 400, and yet you can see there is basically zero noise in the file from the R6 compared to a bit of noise in the file from the 350D. So look, those are raw files, right? Those aren't how the files are going to look once we process them and put them on Instagram or wherever else we want to put them. So let me show you the processed files. So these are the ones that I've edited to see how these look, because of course once you've edited a photo, it looks fairly different from the raw file. So let me put those on the screen right now. So here you go. So the first thing you're going to notice is now they look much, much more similar. Of course, because I've edited my photos to get them to where I want to. That does mean, of course, I've done some slightly different editing on each of the two files. The file from the 350D, I had to do a little bit more playing around with the shadows and the highlights to get that exposure just where I wanted it to be. However, I found that I had to do a little bit less work with the colors compared to the more flat color profile from the 6D file, where I had to do a fair bit more, play a lot more with the vibrance and the saturation to get that right. So I kind of got the colors a lot easier, I found, in the file from the R6 compared to the file from the 350D. However, the file from the 350D again is still sharper, and of course the reason for that is because it had the expensive lens, so the lens which just produced that real pin sharp image, which I really like. I think you guys will agree, when I put these images side by side, especially on this kind of format on a YouTube screen, there isn't that much difference between them. You guys who are looking at them on bigger, like 4K screens or something, you might better see something slightly different, but you guys, especially you guys watching this on your phones, you might not better tell that much difference at all. In terms of image quality, if I'm literally just looking at them side by side right here on my laptop, you cannot tell a huge difference, and that really makes this one quite interesting for me. So look, let's bring ourselves round to a little bit of a conclusion, right? First of all, what I would say from this experiment is which photo came out the best. I would say it was the photo actually taken with the Canon 350D. Now, how can I say that? The photo from the 350D was better than the photo from the R6. That's because, of course, I had the expensive lens, and as fantastic as the R6 is, if you put a lens on there that cost me 40 quid used on eBay, it's not going to produce the same kind of image quality, and the image was a bit soft around the eyes. It wasn't sharp, especially when you're shooting something like a portrait. You want it to be really sharp and really show the detail, and unfortunately this lens just wasn't able to do that. Now, of course, the thing to consider is that there are some caveats to this, right? If I'd been shooting that photo in any kind of low light, then this camera would have really struggled. That's where the R6 would have come into its own. So I think I should say, if I'd been shooting in any kind of low light, I think even using the cheaper lens, the Canon R6 would have produced the better file. The other thing to think about, of course, is with the more expensive lens, I had the ability to shoot at f2.8. I didn't, I shot at f5.6 in order to try and make the experiment as sort of fair as I could. But of course, if I'd shot at f2.8, it would have crushed that background a little bit more and given me probably a nicer, more rounded feel to my portrait. So again, that's where the more expensive lens comes in. So I've actually said the lens is the better photo, and even then I didn't use that lens to the full capabilities that it actually has. So of course, if I had to choose here, which is better, the cheap camera with the expensive lens or the expensive camera with the cheaper lens, which would I choose? Well, you know what? I would choose the lens, because that's the thing that affected the image quality in this case the most, the lens. Now, of course, the thing that we should point out is that we still got a great, perfectly usable image from the Canon 350D, and so maybe the fact that we spend an awful lot of money on gear isn't always necessary. And in fact, we've maybe got a video coming real soon where we pair the cheap lens with the cheap camera and the expensive lens with the expensive camera, and we're going to take two very similar photos, and we're going to see if you guys can tell any difference whatsoever, because I think that will be a really interesting video. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, because that video is coming very, very soon. I hope you guys found that little experiment interesting. It was quite a good fun one for me to do. I want to do more like comparisons like this, a few different lens comparisons and getting out some old cameras. Even going to do a video, I think, where we're going to see if we can shoot some sports with this one. The Canon 350D, can we shoot some sports with this camera? Spoiler alert, I reckon we probably can. In the meantime, guys, I hope you did enjoy this video. Make sure you hit that like button if you did. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Oh man, this beard is itchy. I've got to shave it off. Not right now. Right now I need to edit a video, but I'm going to shave it off.